Hi, and welcome to Finding Your Way Through Therapy. The goal of this podcast is to demystify therapy, what can happen in therapy, and the wide array of conversations you can have in and about therapy. Through personal experiences, guests will talk about therapy, their experiences with it, and how psychology and therapy are present in many places in their lives. With lots of authenticity and a touch of humor, here is your host, Steve Bisson.
Thank you and welcome to episode 100, episode 100, episode sa. I don't know how to say it otherwise. I don't know my Spanish all that well, but I can't tell you how excited I am. I'm Steve Bisson. Truly happy. Can't believe I got to 100. Tapping myself in the back right now. You can hear it. And if you can't hear it, I promise I tap myself on the back. So for the 100th episode, I decided to have Susan Roggendorf and Stephanie Simpson on. Why Susan and Stephanie? Because they're guests that I truly enjoyed. And yes, I had other guests this week, and I'm going to have a few more the rest of the week, and I've had them before. I truly enjoyed all my guests. This is not a BS thing to tell people like, oh my God, you liked everyone. Yeah, I did. I truly enjoy talking to people, and people who've come to my podcast have been so supportive, so nice, such engaging individuals that this is just an amazing thing. But Susan is the sister from another mother. It doesn't sound so good as brother from another mother, but nonetheless. And Stephanie Simpson, an acquaintance, Courtney Romanowski joined us, and Stephanie has become someone I consider a friend, someone I read her notes regularly or on social media and such, and we exchange fairly regularly. Stephanie has become a good friend and a great coach and just a great human being. So listen to this episode 100. I'm so excited, and you can hear it in my voice, and I wish I had better words. That's what happens when you have too many thoughts. You can't talk. So here I am. So here's the episode. Well, hi, everyone, and welcome. This is the official 100th episode that's going to be released on the Wednesday. So this is officially the 100th show, and I have two people who have been on the show before, and I'm so happy to have them. It's a vanity thing, I'll be perfectly honest, to do these shows because it's people I actually really appreciate and love. And I also do it so that they can compliment me. So let's be honest with everything. But Stephanie Simpson has been on the show 3 times already, and this will be number 4.
Yeah.
So I've had her individually with a good friend of ours, and then we included Morgan at another time. So that's where we stand on that. You can all check those episodes out. And with Susan, this is your 3rd appearance. We did one together alone, and then we did it with a bunch of crazy crisis clinician.
That's right. And I've got one that's coming out with you in it, but I was sick with COVID, so that's been pushed back a couple of weeks. But yeah, you're going to be popping up on mine again too.
I just like the attention. I'll be perfectly honest with you.
Awesome. As long as we understand one another.
That's why we get along so well, Susan. Well, Susan Roggendorf and Stephanie Simpson, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask I know you've been on the show before. People are going to rush back and listen to that. But I also know that some people may not know you because I do have new listeners that come in regularly. So how about you introduce yourself? We'll start off with Stephanie.
Sure. So I'm Stephanie Simpson. I'm based in Manhattan, so New York City, and I am a professional certified coach. So I coach people in a variety of different spaces. I really look at coaching as a holistic practice and really helping people find alignment, mind, body, spirit, and spirit is defined by my coachee and my clients. And I work in a lot of industries right now, working a lot in tech, education, arts and entertainment. I'm trying to think of other things, a lot of leadership development, executive development, and groups. So I do both one-on-one, but also team and group coaching, which has been a lot of fun. And previous to being into my full-time practice of coaching, I was a full-time dancer, performer, choreographer, director, and arts educator. So you mentioned our mutual friend. That's how I know our mutual friend is we were both dancers in college together. And so I bring a lot of that arts background, arts education, philosophy, as well as just creativity into all the work that I do.
I'll tell Courtney Romanowski that she owes us a few dollars for promoting her so well.
That's right. That's right.
Welcome to the show. Susan, I am so happy that you survived COVID, and that's a true statement. I hope your smell comes back by the time this is out. But Susan, how about you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm back again to give Steve a hard time as usual. I work in private practice. My business is Co-Felt Counseling Services. I'm based in Bettendorf. I am part of a collective. It's not a group practice. We're all independent therapists who have come in and joined together to be in this one office for a lot of really good benefits for us and our clients. That's with the Mad Therapy Collective in Bettendorf. I've been in Iowa, yes. And I've been in the ER as a crisis clinician. I have worked with everyone from those persons that have anxiety and depression to those persons who have thankfully survived a suicide attempt, to persons who are dealing with psychosis, as well as substance use disorders. And those were always interesting. And then I decided to open up my private practice, and I have dropped the ER component now. I work with first responders, law enforcement. I also work with staff who are hospital staff in the ER and ICU because those are high stress environments. They don't get a lot of support, as well as those folks who are staff in urgent care and express care because they are hit as hard as what they are in the ER. And I don't think they get enough support as well. I'm also part of the queer community, so I support all of my persons in the queer community that are dealing with life issues, including transitioning. So I'm very happy to have all of that as a way of giving back to the universe and trying to alleviate some suffering on someone's part for at least a few minutes and allow them to develop skills to continue alleviating whatever crisis or problems that come across in their lives so they can go on and have fulfilling lives. And then I have a podcast where I get to swear a lot. Fuck the Rules podcast. Steve, you've been on it 3 times now? Yeah, you've been on it 3 times now. So that's been wonderful. I'm going to be starting season 4 in September. I'm on hiatus now. So it's been a lot of fun. I've had a lot of great people come on, and I'm looking forward to more and different voices coming on again in the future. So that's me in a nutshell.
I was going to say, I wanted to be on it for season 4 too, but.
Well, of course you are. I mean, it's like 1 episode a season. Come on.
All right.
Did you read your contract? Man.
Oh, Jesus Christ. I forgot.
Can I just say, I love the name of that podcast because I like smiled when I heard it because I feel like sometimes we can put therapists and teachers and all these different people in these boxes and pedestals that are like, well, they have it all figured out, or they're this put together, or they don't do this, or they don't do that. And so to have a podcast where a therapist is like, fuck the rules, right? What a wonderful way to give permission to people to just be like, things are shit sometimes.
Exactly.
Like, here we go.
And that was the whole purpose of starting the podcast, is I was guesting on other people's podcasts. Meg Kelly, she had one mental status podcast, and we were talking about how I was getting fed up with old school tradition of therapy and old school ways of dealing with crisis. And one of it was at a point where I had said, well, fuck your rules. And the more I started thinking about it, the more I wanted to do a podcast. And that's where the title came up of Fuck the Rules. So it's interesting because it's amazing that the persons that I've had on have covered different backgrounds with their careers. And one of them, or several of them, have actually been teachers. And you're right, you get put in this box. And I think we all do, because there's this media presence. And Steve, I love getting on my soapbox about media and how it warps things and it informs us, unfortunately, in the wrong with what we should be expecting out of persons in their professions. That's just not the way it is, especially after the pandemic. So that's kind of the whole point of the show, was just to say, this is how it is now. It's not for therapists. I always talk about being that blank canvas we're taught to be, where you're not supposed to give anything back in therapy, the suit, tie. And it's just like, I am so fucking not that. I've got the colored hair. I've got the mohawk. I've got tattoos. I'm 56 years old this year. I'm a fat female who's queer. And I just don't give a rat's ass anymore. I'm here to help people. But this is genuinely who I am. And that's the whole point of saying the rules, is to be genuinely who you are, to get to that point of living a genuine life.
So since you give me a hard time, I'm going to give you a hard time. You said fuck the rules, but you do care about other people. That's why you're so good at what you do. So let's start with that.
Oh, stop spreading rumors about me.
Oh, I still take your ass to me, but to other people, you're very nice. So just wanted to start that. And the other thing too, I want to add, because I think that with Fuck the Rules, as well as what you do, I think that Stephanie, with your coaching stuff and talking to leadership about ways to do things in a different light, that is Fuck the Rules for all intents and purposes, from my perspective too. So I think you're perfect for it's a perfect match here.
I have to agree.
Yeah, I was really struck by what you're saying, Susan, about like, I'm showing up as me and my authentic self, and like, here's what it is. And like, that's really the only way we can actually connect with other people, right? If we're spending so much energy trying to be something else that we're not, then we're not like, that's disingenuous. And connection is all about being authentic and being vulnerable. And going back to leadership, I'm a huge Brene Brown fan. When she talks about leadership, she talks about it as vulnerable leadership. And, you bring up teachers and educators and pandemic everywhere in the pandemic. I was actually teaching full time during the pandemic, and I was like, and now I'm ready to leave, as many of us did. But also with leadership, it's like, you're not actually doing a service to your team, to your company, if you're not showing your authentic self, because then you don't become approachable. You also are human. You don't have all the answers as a leader, right? And so being able to do that in a way that's it also has some boundaries, right? Like you also like when I think about leaders, not you specifically, but leaders, you're in a leadership position. You do have to like create a space where people can trust you, but part of that trust is also being authentic and vulnerable so that people can feel like they connect with you. So I think being able to have the permission to do things not by the book is also where creativity and innovation happens. If we all kept doing everything the same by the book the same way, nothing new would be created.
And that's part of the problem too with the pandemic is that we had to be forcing companies and leaders to understand that you can't have the same type of model we've all been laboring under, literally laboring under, because it's not going to work. So we have done this remote job thing and remote teaching thing, and some worked great, some was shit. And we kind of figured out where we can do it well and where things need to be improved and where things just, it needs the person to person aspect depending on what it is that you're doing, right? But now leaders want to ratchet it back to pre-pandemic. Education systems want to go back to pre-pandemic, and insurance companies who pay for a lot of persons that come to see me, at least, they want to ratchet it back to pre-pandemic. It's like, you let all these crazy snakes out of the basket. There is no way you're going to get them all back in that basket again, because we're not the same people we were 3 years ago. We're not the same society we were 3 years ago, good and bad. But we have to continue thinking forward. And like you said, be creative, be genuine. And we are human beings. And once you kind of make that connection, it makes it easier to be the creative person because you're not going to get censured for not being in this protocol path that you're not supposed to stray from.
Yeah, I really love that. I encounter that a lot too in my work of people being like, well, we need to get back to what we were doing before. And I'm like, oh, that's not like you said, we're not the same people. And by denying that, we're actually like taking away a lot of potential growth and opportunity, right? And what we all went through and continue to an extent was really traumatic. And so not acknowledging that and being like, how are we going to acknowledge and work with that to create something that is new, I think is somewhat delusional, really. And actually it's a big like trauma response in some ways. So you guys are more the experts on trauma than I am, but really is that we learned a lot of really good things too that made things better. And why are people afraid to continue to explore that? And as I was listening to you talk, I was thinking about that's where really the creative process comes in, right? When I'm creating a new dance piece with a dance company or a show, I mean, it is all trial and error. Even to putting it on stage, it's still trial and error sometimes. But there's so much that we've learned in mistakes that actually have created some really beautiful moments on stage. But we had to allow for those mistakes. And I would really love to see companies and schools and just people in general really kind of shift their relationship to what mistakes and failures and wrongs are, because I think that would alleviate a lot of the stress, the anxiety, which then can also the burnout that people get to.
We have as human nature, and I'm not defending it, I'm just noting it. We evolve and then we de-evolve for a short while. If you look at history and Copernicus, who like this crazy guy who said the earth is not flat. Well, we locked him up, even though he proved it. And then until later on, they're like, yeah, maybe it's round. And for those who are flat earthers listening to this, I'm sorry I broke something here. Number two, I think about the French Revolution and how that changed significantly But what did they do in France after a year or two? They went back to a monarchy for a short amount of time, but they went back because they were so afraid of the change. I think what I would liken what's going on between what you guys said is that we had change, and now people are like, oh, I feel unsafe. I feel traumatized. I want to go back to what I knew. Well, in life, that's not how you evolve. And I think that what we need, I come back to when I was listening to everything you both said, all that could come to mind is evolution, evolution, evolution. And this is probably to step back so we can hopefully go forward after this.
Well, the two things. First to you, Stephanie, was I like that you use the word mistake, because that is something I work with my clients all the time, is that they say that I was a failure or I am a failure because of X, Y, or Z. And it's like, we have put a different connotation to the word failure than what it really means, which is you just didn't connect with the end goal, which means you didn't meet it. That's okay, because if we go through life and we keep meeting our goals, we don't know that there might be another path that shows us a better way to do things, an improvement we would have never considered before, because everything else is kind of going okay, so why change it, right? Unless you get the creative types that go, I wonder if I did this, what would happen? But that's a smaller component, which speaks to you, Steve, about people as humans. Our brains don't like change. We want things to be able to be labeled. We want to be able to identify, because once we do, we understand we're safe. If we know where we are, if we know the people around us, if we understand what the rules are in our community, someone comes in from other, we can detect whether they are immediately friend or foe. And that's just survival, right? And we continue that on even in our own society. So now we're post-pandemic. We're trying to figure out the failures that, okay, so they failed. So what do we learn from that? How can we make it better? How can we change things so that we are more enhanced in what we do in every life and living our lives? But then also, how do we not slip back into before, because it's what we know as a role and we understand it and we're comfortable with it, even though it doesn't work anymore. It's like that with a lot of relationships too, right? So all of that to say that it's an opportunity for us to continue moving forward and seeing what works for us and what doesn't. And you're right, Steve, if we can get out of that stuck mode of, okay, we've reverted back because we're scared. There's too much change. There's too much new. And then we realize, okay, it's not as bad as what we thought it was. Let's keep moving forward. People forget the point of we weren't what we were even 10 years ago. We're not what we were back in the early 2000s. We certainly weren't what we were back in the 90s. And I'm thinking with our own homegrown terrorists that changed things. And then as we have moved through major societal shift and things, we're never the same. But every time we have something that shakes up, we get freaked out because we're like, what the hell do we do with this now?
Well, I think that that's why it's interesting. Like, one of the things that I was going to ask you guys is what's the one thing we should know about psychology and therapy and coaching? And I think that we talked about evolution so brilliantly and how the things change and how to bring upon change. I think that you kind of answered that question. I don't know if that's what you would have answered. I know that for me, that's something that I work on, because what I know today is not what I know tomorrow. And that's okay. I'm going to learn something new. And I never judge, never. I shouldn't make a whole statement. I've worked hard not to judge myself yesterday for what I know today. And that's, I think, a big evolution that human beings need to learn to do, because I go back to talk about history. Sorry, I'm a big history buff. Whatever, and it triggers anyone, please know that that's not my goal. On 9/11, most people say, well, George Bush got a memo on September 7th saying that this might happen. And I say, not that I was a George Bush fan, but I always say, but he gets those memos daily that says there's a threat. That's you having after insight and saying he should have known. Again, I don't think that I can blame George Bush. I don't blame anyone. That was a terrible, terrible attack. But we always look in hindsight and try to judge and blame people instead of saying, hey, we didn't know. End the story. Let's leave it at that and learn from it. But anyway, go ahead if you want to go and talk about a little bit of what we should know about psychology, therapy, coaching that maybe people not necessarily do know.
You know what I was thinking as you were saying that, Steve, is the word acceptance came up, maybe because I'm learning how to practice that more with my therapist, is like, how can I accept what is when we try to go back and go, oh, I should have done this, or, oh, I need to blame this person or blame that person. It's not actually helping us to move forward, where it's like, how can we have space to accept what is so that we can go forward, right? And I think what therapy does, at least from my perspective, working with my therapist and coaching, what I do for others, is it provides that space and that container to do it without judgment. I'll just speak from an I perspective. I don't know that I could have all the conversation. I want to have all the conversations I'm having with my therapist and my coach with other people in my life, but I don't know that I could with everybody in my life for fear of their response, their judgment, which I think at times I could remind myself their response is more of a reflection of them than it is of what I said. But that takes a lot of work to constantly be doing that. So I always think, how amazing would it be if every single person got to work with either a therapist or coach, or radical both? How much, like, I don't know, like healing would just happen, because people would be able to say the things that they don't want to say, like that they don't even want to say it in their own head, right? They could say it to someone else and just relieve a lot of burden. And I would do a lot of somatic stuff. So like everything lives in our body. We may be thinking it a lot, but it really lives in our body. And being able to get that out of the body, have someone hear it and witness it, who's not going to then turn around and go, well, you're a terrible person for saying that or thinking that, right? It's just so powerful and magical that if we could have that space for everybody, I think there would be maybe a different relationship would change, and fear and evolution and growing and all of that. That's what I'll say about that.
For my part, in hearing you two talk, it's three things for me. First of all, what I meant to say earlier, but wanted to save for the recording, is that in having multiple persons involved in helping a person figure out where they want to go to be genuine and on their journey, it should be about community and not competition. It's one of the main mantras we have in our collective amongst ourselves, is that there aren't enough of us. There's so much need out there, and it will only benefit persons if we can get connected up and being able to share with one another, this is what we're doing for this person, but you have this area of expertise. I would really like for them to meet up with you to see if you're a good fit. And if not, let's get them to the right person so that they benefit from it. So they can continue to grow in terms of who they are as a person, where they're going to be genuine to themselves, which then lends itself to, let's start challenging inherited expectations people have, from what you're talking about, Stephanie, and you too, Steve, about people expect certain things, but unfortunately we never examine where we inherited those expectations from. Is it from family? Is it from community? Is it from religion? Is it from our ethnicity, background, and cultural heritage? It comes from a lot of different places. It's never any one thing. So then you start challenging, well, are those expectations working for you? If they're not, what would you like to do with that? Do you want to change it? Do you want to alter it in some way? Do you want to get rid of it? Do you want to create new expectations? And then from there, we start talking about boundaries. If you're going to be changing these expectations for yourself, this means it's going to challenge the expectations of others, which means you need to start figuring out what your boundaries are, how you're going to sustain boundaries with other persons, and then also recognizing other people have boundaries that we have to respect as well. We don't have to, but it goes better if we do. So for all of those things, that's how I see it all kind of tying together, is just being able to help one another in our journeys to be just decent human beings. It's hard.
And I think that what we need to learn to do is to see that what we all want, whoever you are in life, whether you're the CEO of a company to the person who is homeless, all we really truly want in this world is to be accepted. I think that I don't know. We joke, what I love about me and you, Susan, is that we joke around a lot and there's clear acceptance. We don't need to say those words, but if we need to say it, so yeah, accept Susan. I know Susan accepts me, but that's all we want in life, because we carry so much shame. I think Stephanie mentioned shame earlier, and we carry so much shame about whatever we've done. I've learned a long time ago that shame is probably my worst enemy. And then my therapist few weeks ago made me do an exercise of shame without talking and just feeling it in my body, and it blew my mind away. So I think that with shame is also another part that I think we need to teach people, is that shame is such a motivator in a bad way. And like people say, well, shame has pushed me. When I didn't do well, I said, you're a loser, you're this, you're that, I'm going to get better. Yeah, that works for a short while. Eventually it destroys your character and it's not healthy. And, we got to retrain people, but I don't know what you guys think about that. But I want to mention that because when you talked about shame, I think that that's something I really want to mention because it is about setting the boundaries. It's about acceptance. It's about a whole lot of different things.
And shame is also misunderstood, like you just pointed out, that people think it's gotten me motivated to do better. And then we have to talk about that inherited expectation again. Where did you learn that? Who taught you that? This had to come from somewhere, that this is how you made this connection between shame and motivation and doing better. But as you said, Steve, it doesn't work out that well for the long period. It's going to start breaking down, and the person's going to start presuming that just about everything they're not worthy of being able to pursue, or maybe they earned it, and there's the guilt that goes along with the shame. So, yeah, I mean, it just becomes this big old juggernaut of snarly mess over here. And then you have to say, let's start talking about pulling that apart and seeing where that actually started with.
And before you go, Steph, I just want to add, and that's why our queer LGBTQ plus other spirited community gets shamed regularly, because we carry our own shame. So we're uncomfortable with that. So let's throw it on people. And again, I'm not saying everyone does that. So please don't text me or email me saying, oh, I don't do that. I really don't care if you do or not in some ways. But I think that that's where it comes from when we're not understanding of transgender. We're not understanding of, and I'm blanking on different terms. But for me, other spirited has always been my favorite because that's what Native Americans call it. If you're gay, bisexual, transgender, you're just other spirited. And I always thought it was a great way, because that's in Native American culture, it's just another person. That's all. It's easy. It's acceptance. And that's why for me, if we just learn to use other spirited, it would be so much better, and it would be create acceptance, because that's what we do. We send, oh, I'm uncomfortable. I don't know enough about transgender. Let's shame them. That'll make me feel better. So just my 2 cents. Sorry, Steph. I know you were going to say something.
I know, I was so listening. I'm like, oh, what was I going to say? I think what I was going to say was that when I was listening to both of you, I was struck by the language also we use in terms of not I failed or I am a failure, right? Or instead of I'm feeling this, I am that. And I do this too. And I'm trying to shift myself with it as well, is from my yoga practice of really being like, okay, we can have goals, right? I don't think any of us are saying like, don't have a goal, don't work towards anything. But the attachment to that of saying like, I am only successful when I reach that goal, which goes again with those like expectations, whatever those may be, right? And going back to that idea of process of what if I just really be in the process? I may not get to that goal, but I learned this whole other thing. I don't even know if I'm making sense right now. My brain is, I'm training for a race. And so I had a long run today. And as I was listening to all of you, I was thinking about running, and I was thinking about one of the communities I'm in right now and how I really appreciate the community and connection of runners, and how running really teaches you to meet yourself where you are at every single run. Because what you might feel one day is not the same as the other, but yet I can sometimes, well, I'm a failure. I failed today. I didn't run as fast as I was supposed to. I didn't do the miles I was supposed to. And how important it is to remind ourselves that the act of doing, the process of doing is just as important. And then what that reminded me of what you were saying, Steve, is when we are so thinking about things are supposed to be this way or that way, when someone else is doing something that to me, it seems way more freedom, right? Like, wait, you don't need to put yourself in this box or this box or this. You created your own box, or like you expanded the box. That can be really upsetting for some people, because they're like, but I'm in this box and I can't get out of it. And so if I can't get out of this box, you aren't allowed to either. And then we get a lot of, unfortunately, the hate that's coming out of that.
I was watching Susan. I know she's going to say something very, very important right now.
I'm just trying to find the unmute button so I don't sneeze in everybody's ears. You're right. It's about that I'm stuck in this box, Stephanie. And if I'm stuck here, you shouldn't be allowed to do either. But then again, it's a question of, why do you think you're stuck in that box? What is it that you feel that is a threat to you stepping outside of that box? And a lot of persons, unfortunately, don't have access to persons like ourselves to be able to start asking that questions of themselves. Or I know that was one of the questions you had for us, Dave. People, what do you want people to think about with therapy or life coach? I want people to understand that it's not supposed to be a threat to who you are internally. Initially, people come in and they're very wary about, well, I'm here because, so-and-so said I need to be here, partner, parent, whatever. And then it's like, why are you here? Well, because they told me I want to be here. Well, there's the door. You don't have to be here. You're not mandated here. You're not supposed to be here. You can leave at any point in time. They're like, really? Yeah. I don't want you here if you don't feel comfortable. If you don't want to be part of this conversation that we're having, there's a door. If you change your mind, you can always come back. But in the meantime, there's the door. And then, funny enough, they stay every single time. So a lot of people don't have access to that to be able to start creating a safe space where they can start exploring the reason why am I stuck in this box? Do I really want to stay here? What's the benefit to me? What's the benefit to the people around me? And that's usually the question more often than not is, all right, we understand what it's doing for you, but what is it doing for the people around you that you have to stay in that box? What is it that's a threat to them if you get out of that box? And how do you want to change that kind of engagement with one another? And I think that's what people need to understand about therapy is about, we're not going to change you. We're not going to, the old term is head shrink you and make you someone you're not. What a lot of people find out, though, is that as they become more genuine and they start shedding these layers of who they thought they should be, that's when everybody gets freaked out. It's like, we don't even know who you are anymore. Well, that's because I'm not who I once was, going back to, pre-pandemic levels, and saying, this is how I want to be. This is how I want to live my life. And I want you to continue to be in this journey with me. But if you can't, that's okay, too. Again, inherited expectations, boundaries. What do other people benefit from you putting yourself in that box?
And I like the expectation thing, too, because that's what it typically comes to. I'm going to switch gears here, if you don't mind. I know we could go on and on about this, but I wanted to, because you brought it up about the questions. What I love about what I do here on the podcast is that it's always a conversation. It's not like, hi, Stephanie, how are you? Can you tell us more about coaching, please? Can you tell me more about LGBTQ? Susan, insert name here. I just hate that stuff on podcasts, and I try to be as natural as I can. So when I switch gears, it's really because I have a question I want to ask. So I want to switch gears because you guys have been really gelling, and again, not knowing each other, it's so awesome. Is there a question you have for each other? Because, one of you does a lot of like coaching in different settings. You're working in a different setting, coming from the crisis side to the LGBTQ community and working in an outpatient clinical setting. Do you have any questions for each other?
Okay. So, Susan, I would love to hear, what are you most curious about right now in your life?
In terms of the work that I do, or just me as a human being?
Both.
You can take that however you want.
Steve, you said we had a time limit. If you say both, we're going to be here for days.
No one listens, Susan. Don't worry.
Good. I can go on ad nauseum. For the work that I'm doing right now, actually, because I've worked with persons with suicide and I have worked with persons with chronic suicidal ideation, I joined the American Association of Suicidality. And there's a lot of great resources on there for persons. And a lot of folks that are in first responders, hospital staff, law enforcement, a lot of those folks don't have that outlet to be able to talk about having what they call dark thoughts. We never call it suicide because that's like saying the Q word when you're in the hospital. You don't say that. It's very superstitious. But for me, I don't have that boundary respect. And I tell them, we're going to call it what it is, which is suicide. So for me, I'm digging more into the newer research that's coming out about suicide, preventative, learning to live with suicidal ideation, new ways to do coping mechanisms with persons. So that's really kind of driving me right now in work. Personally, I'm planting new flowers this year to see if I can get them to grow in my new garden space on my balcony this year, because I want to attract more hummingbirds and dragonflies and butterflies. So I'm doing a lot more horticultural research. So that's kind of what's driving me as a person right now. So my question for you, though, is what are some of the bigger challenges you have? Because you and I both know what that expectation is of both of our careers here. What is it for you that you battle against in being a life coach?
So I actually don't like bill myself I just bill myself as a coach. And I would say the biggest thing is people not understanding what coaching is. And so actually right before we had this call for this recording, I had what I call a discovery call. So if anybody, when people are interested in working with me, the first thing we do is a 30-minute discovery call. And it's a way for me to understand what their curiosity is, what's bringing them to even think about maybe doing coaching. I go through what I call, I mean, I didn't term it this, but the forms of help spectrum. So I explain to them, okay, here's this spectrum of directive, non-directive, and here's different forms of help from consultant to mental health counselor to mentor to teacher to coach, so that they really understand what the different roles are. Because also there are some people that are coming to me where like coaching maybe isn't the type of help that they need. And so it would be non-ethical and negligent of me to be like, yeah, that's what I need. Like, that's what you need. Maybe they do really just need a mentor. Maybe they actually need a consultant, or very much sometimes it's like, no, this is a therapist sector and I am not a licensed therapist. So that's not where I'm supposed to be. So I always educate people on that so that they know, because I think because the word coach has been used in so many different ways, right? Sports coach, instructional coach, things like that, which have a little more telling involved in them and teaching and consulting. What I'm certified in and what the ICF, the International Coaching Federation, says is that coaching is not about telling, it is about asking. So like our like three truths of coaching is the coachee is capable and whole, the coachee has all the answers. My job is to ask, not tell. And so that for some people can be really frustrating because they'll be like, well, I'm coming to you because you've made different shifts in your career and I want to know what I should do. Well, I don't have that answer. Or you created your own coaching business. How do I do that? Well, I don't know. What worked for me may not work for you, right? And I specialize a lot in stress and stress management and leadership practices. So it's like, well, how I am as a leader is going to be different than someone else because I believe in authentic leadership and no one else is me and I'm not anybody else. So I really try to, it can be challenging at times because also I'm a human and I want to help people. And sometimes I want to jump in there and be like, oh, I have an idea or I know what would work. And I have to remind myself, which we call coaching presence and practicing the coaching mindset, is I may have an idea, but that is not necessarily the idea because I'm not that person. And I check myself. I'm not some guru that can just tell people. So I would say that is one of the bigger challenges that I sometimes have, is that people come expecting me to give them answers when really I'm just going to ask them a lot of questions. I'm going to listen to them and then I'm going to mirror back things I heard. And sometimes just say, it sounds like blah, 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 and not put an analysis on it and just sit there and let them respond. So, and that can be really uncomfortable for some people. And for other people, they find it really liberating.
And I really want to add this. I know I've probably talked about it 3 times in 2 weeks now, but this is one of my favorite things that happened. I believe it was the Dalai Lama. Someone went to see the Dalai Lama and said, I want to be enlightened. How long does it take? Dalai Lama thought about it, said 10 years. The person says, well, I'm really in a rush. I want to do it quick. 5 years. So the person goes on their way, goes for 5 years, then comes back to see the Dalai Lama. My enlightened, it's been 5 years, 10 years. And that's what the teacher responds. And I think that what I get from that message is that what our journey is not determined by time or other people. It's determined by our own volition. And if you're in a rush to be mindful or to be coached properly or to go through whatever people need, I think that that's where we go severely wrong in life, because my journey is daily changing. When you talk about order culture, you talk about your curiosity about suicidality, coaching and the good or not. You know, the ICF is a great organization. I'm going to link that in the notes because I think it's so important for people to understand that coaching, even though it's not quite the Wild West that it was maybe 10 years ago, it's still fairly wild. There's only a few sheriffs in town, and I think we just got to get it better. And don't be in a rush to be a coach. Don't be in a rush to understand suicidality. Like, oh, I'll go to the fast track. No, suicidality is so complex. I don't want you to learn that fast. So I think that that's what we tend to do, right? In the society of go, go, go. I know nothing. Tomorrow I'll realize that I didn't know nothing today. And as I grow older and older, the more I realize I have limited knowledge of life. And I've got to get better every single day. And that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. It's just realizing that I knew everything when I was 20. And I so realized that I was so misguided at that point. But just wanted to share that because it goes a little bit with the theme of what you both said. As this is as I said, this is about my podcast, about me. It's my 100th anniversary. We talked about so many great things here. But in all honesty, like, let me be very blunt with both of you. I truly love people who are open-minded, who are fun, who are not taking themselves too seriously, but knows when to be serious. And people who are just nice people. And definitely that falls into the criteria for both of you. That's why you've come back so often. I respect you tremendously. I respect everyone, obviously, but I truly respect people who are always willing to, like, I love that Stephanie keeps on looking for more and more. And Susan, what you've done is that you go from one subject to another, and then you look into it, and then you keep on digging and find something else to dig about. And I think that for me, once we lose curiosity, we lose life. And I think you both embody some people who are curious and delightful and funny and everything else that goes with that. So wanted to make sure I said that to you guys. But as I am self-centered sometimes, I will say, well, now it's your turn to compliment me. Why? All joking aside, why do you keep on coming back to this podcast? Because obviously you've been on a few times, both of you, and obviously you'll be invited for seasons to come. So why do you keep on coming back?
Well, I'll just say, well, thank you for those compliments. The first time I was on, I didn't know you at all. We were connected by a friend, and I was just so blown away with just the flow of what we could talk about and how we could go for hours if we allowed it to. And said something about curiosity. You also have that. This curiosity, and then this, I would say, radical transparency about things. And that allowed me to actually be even more vulnerable and transparent about myself. And I think a lot of times, if the work I want to do in the world, I also have to embody that. And this was a space that I felt really allowed me to do that in a more public way and felt incredibly safe. And I just also, and the times I kept coming back was because you're like, hey, I really think it'd be cool to bring this person and this person. And I love meeting other people. And so you always do a really great job at connecting other people and having these great conversations. And I always leave learning at least one thing new. And I love that. So that's what I would say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Stephanie said a lot of what I was going to say, which is, first of all, it's your genuineness, Steve. I found you through Instagram, and I started listening to your podcast, and then I invited you into my podcast. And we connected so well. And I joke around about you being your brother from another mother, but I really do feel that we've got a really good connection in terms of a lot of shared background experiences and the things that we've done, especially with law enforcement and first responders. But it's the fact that you keep bringing on, like Stephanie said, persons who may not necessarily connect with one another in the world, even though we're open to doing collaborative work. We just might not be able ever to cross paths. So that is always something I'm looking forward to doing when I come back on your show. But it's, again, like what Stephanie said, you learn shit. I love that. I love not knowing what a coach does now. I have the old school version of what a coach is, which was somebody telling you what to do, or what a lot of people still do, which they shouldn't be doing, in my opinion. But finding out more information about what you do, Stephanie, for your career, because you, Steve, decided to put us together. I would have never thought to have asked Stephanie, because number one, I don't know you and I don't know your work. And also I didn't know the new criteria that a lot of people are trying to attain to be a coach now in terms of different areas of where they want to coach. I also think it's because you are willing to be vulnerable. I mean, not just in your own show, but also when you go and you present information when you come on to other people's show. You're also willing to be vulnerable in your different social media accounts about what happens in your life and how you take responsibility or accountability, or you just want to own it right there. And I really appreciate that about you as well. And it's basically one of the few shows I still get to swear like the demon that I am.
Well, I love this swearing because, as I've said on a couple of other podcasts, truly what I've always wanted, like whether you like him today or not, or even in the past, I take on Howard Stern's persona very well in the sense that he was always curious and would take people and then they forgot about the mic that was in front of them. And for me, I think that a good mark of a good podcast, is not only putting people that may not have talked to each other, but they forget they're being recorded. And I think that's key to any good conversation. Someone mentioned our conversation, Susan, with Bill and Kara. Sorry, Steph, that's the one they mentioned. And they were saying, I was feeling like I was listening to four-season crisis clinician, just shooting the shit and just being themselves. And they truly believe in what they do and what they like. And I'm like, that's kind of what I want to do. I want people to get in because therapists, coaches, people I invite on this podcast, and not everyone is in those realms. We're humans. We're not, I certainly, you talk about my authenticity. That always touches me because that is something I work very hard to be, just me. And that's what I want people to know. Like, no one has their shit together. I mean, I don't know anyone who has their shit together. I do pretty good most of the time, but I don't have all my shit together. I was like, you talked about what you just did before you were doing that exploratory interview with someone. Right before this, I got a message from someone who told me, like, wait a minute, Steve, did you do so-and-so? And I'm not going to go into details because I just don't want to put people on that are not on the podcast. And I'm in my head and I'm like, fuck you. And because I'm like, get the context and you're right, but don't say that stuff to me because you're like, yeah, you took it out completely out of context and I sound like a huge dope. No, put it back in context. And I put it back and I said, oh, and here is what I'm going to do in the future. And I know I came off as strong and angry, and I'm okay with that, but I couldn't fake mean. I wasn't going to try to fake mean. I don't want to compromise that ever again in my life.
And I think that's what your guests get too. At least I do, in the terms of being able to be open and genuine and the vulnerability. I do not have my shit together a lot of the times because life keeps happening. It's what I tell my clients all the time. You could come out with this plan and then it doesn't go to plan and you're like, well, shit, now what? And they're like, yeah, but you're a therapist. Guess what? I still say that. I'm not a demigod. I cannot force events to the way I see it best working out. And that's just acknowledging you're a human being and taking advantage of your insight and knowledge.
This is where we're going to disagree. You have your own Funko Pop, from what I understand.
Yes,
so you
I
are
do.
a demigod.
It's not a demigod if you can buy somebody's artwork. Stop it.
Hey, I had to put it out there.
But I think that's just part of it, is the fact that everybody is allowed to be who they are on your show. And that makes a huge difference as well. And if we're comfortable, then we can forget that we're being recorded, and God only knows where I'll end up. But here I am right now. And this is what I'm doing. And no, I don't have my shit together all the time. And that's okay.
I was just going to say, I love following you on social media. You make me laugh at least once a day with the things that you post on social media.
Well, I really had to laugh because I sometimes laugh at the stuff I read, and that's why I share it, because the one that recently came out that said, so what happened when you tried to predict the behavior of other people? What do we say? Called it. No, that's not. So yeah. I just love to make people laugh because life is serious enough. We can talk about a lot of serious stuff in our jobs, from coaching to business to mental health. So, we got to laugh. I mean, that's life.
Yep.
I can't tell you how happy I am that you came on, especially for the 100th anniversary, the 100th episode anniversary. I really appreciate that. You will come back. I will find some perfect guests. I actually have someone in mind for both of you. I just got to set it up.
I don't know. That sounds more like a threat than an invitation, Steve. I'm so glad you're staying consistent.
I'm good. I'm good at threatening people, but don't tell people that's why you came back. But I really, truly appreciate it. And the one thing I will say, because I am a Brene Brown fan, I do have a few clips that I love about her. But if you guys want to send me a clip so that I can put it in the show notes to share, I would really appreciate that. And Susan, I'll put your stuff on the show notes, including the podcast. And Stephanie, I'll put your website on so people can go and check you out and do all that. So just want to make sure that that's all linked. And what I was hoping to be a 30-minute conversation, again, did not happen. And that's a good thing because I'm never going to be the guy who stops a good conversation from happening. So thank you, guys.
Well, thank you for having me, Steve.
Thank
And
you.
Stephanie, it was a pleasure to meet you. We wouldn't have met otherwise. And it's an honor to be on the 100th episode. I mean, I haven't quite reached mine just yet, but it's a big mile marker. And I think you should be really proud of the work that you do here and the information you're able to get out to people that might think they're alone. It's huge. It's invaluable. Thank you for letting me be here.
Yeah, I second all of that. I mean, what a huge accomplishment to get to 100. I mean, just in commitment to make sure, like, I know what goes into producing a podcast and stuff, and that's a big commitment. So the marathon in its own. So congrats on that. Thank you for inviting me. And yeah, Susan, it was great. I was thinking as he was like, I have another person for both of you. It's like, it's almost like a matchmaking podcast service that you have created. But that, like, in my head, I was like, you're a really good connector, right? Because like after this, I hope Susan and I start following each other and connecting. And it's also just a lovely resource, like knowing what you do now and people that I work with who are trying to, whether they're therapists or coaches that are looking at, it's like, oh, I have this great resource of this person here and meet them and stuff. So I really appreciate being here and your honesty and transparency and laughter. I love that we got to laugh as well as we talk through all this.
Well, I like connecting people. I also have fear of new people. So that's probably why I do it too. I'm kidding, of course. So thanks, guys. Well, this concludes episode 100 of Finding Your Way Through Therapy. Susan Roggendorf, Stephanie Simpson, thank you so much. I can't thank you enough for this great opportunity. I hope you enjoyed it. And for the next episode, I'm not telling you what it's going to be. I have a surprise for you. Something that if you think authenticity and being myself is something that you like about my show, wait till you hear the next episode. I'm not going to say what it is, so I hope you listen.
Please like, subscribe, and follow this podcast on your favorite platform. A glowing review is always helpful. And as a reminder, this podcast is for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only. If you're struggling with a mental health or substance abuse issue, please reach out to a professional counselor for consultation. If you are in a mental health crisis, call 988 for assistance. This number is available in the United States.